Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are learning about philosophical midwifery. We are in chapter 2. We're in the part 2 of a list of things about the Pathologos that we are going to explore. We have already gone through the nature of the Pathologos, which also included a definition of midwifery itself. Now we are in the condition and the transmission of the Pathologos. Where did we get this nasty Pathologos? Nasty, what is the Pathologos? Well, it's a many and a one. It's problems and beliefs. It is something that we are living out, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not. We are going through successive refinements of it. We are polishing up what is false in a similar way to what we do when we do philosophy on this channel. Read the logos, practice the dialectic, and in doing so, we are polishing up what is true. An intellectual study and a kind of meditation. If you are watching along with the Mino reading, you might even be wondering whether or not philosophy is the archetype of spiritual meditation. That's a question for the Mino. So, a fundamental false belief about our own worthiness of ourself, and the integrity of reality. So self and reality. That's the Pathologos. Okay? And we need to structure it. We need to surface its form, which is called its morphology. We need to figure out what it looks like and how we got it, so that we can free ourselves from it. And the better we understand it, the more we are able to become free of it. Okay, so this successive refinement of the Pathologos that is one way of defining what is human life. Human life is through successive instances of our Pathologos, we refine it and we integrate it. It starts as an underlying false belief about self and reality. And as we live, we play out successive expressions of that in our lives, and that becomes that forms the basic image of the self. So while philosophy is the dialectic applied to what is true about the self, as human beings we are playing out a dialectic of the false belief of the self, which becomes the image of yourself. What image do you carry about yourself? That's something you've been refining as you've been living. Okay? It becomes also a mask, a kind of persona, a way of relating to people. And mask or persona, a characteristic way of relating to ourselves in the world. Okay, that's what we have been refining. But we can also refine an understanding of the Pathologos through midwifery sessions. So we have a choice. That's our choice. Do we want to be mindlessly, cluelessly doing work to refine what's false, create a negative, harmful, destructive way of being, image of the self, mask and persona, way of relating to ourselves? Do we want to be doing that? Or do we want to be doing a similar thing except on what's true? Do we want to be refining a understanding of the Pathologos? Do we want to be reading this book as much as we can, talking with our friends and loved ones about what's false as much as we can, answering that internal Pathologos voice that tries to convince us of our own unworthiness or the lack of integrity of the reality we're in? Do we want to be answering that? And in doing so, refining an understanding of the Pathologos and a mastery of midwifery. That's our choice as human beings. We have that choice. A lot of people are not aware of that choice, but if you're watching this, good for you, because you have come across someone to say, hey, look, this is your choice. You're in this game anyway. You might not be yet aware of how you came into this game that we call life, but you're here and that's what you're doing. So we have a choice. Refine our pathologos, that becomes our false image of the self that we think is real, or do we want to be refining our understanding? Also, we have to look at the counterattack. When we gain an understanding, when we gain insight, when we become more free, the pathologos will try and counterattack. Undermine your understanding, attack your newly won understanding, doubt the method, doubt yourself, doubt the conclusions you've come to, and maintain a loyalty to those negative false beliefs we call the pathologos. So that was the nature of the pathologos, the condition of the transmission. Let's jump in and read from there. Here we go. The pathologos has a pervasive influence on one's life and can be traced through generations. It is carried through successive generations because it is an imitated ideal. Oh, imitation. So we can ask questions. What does belief and faith have to do with imitation compared to our choice to refine our understanding? To understand the conditions for imitation, we must know how it was learned in our youth and how it is passed from generation to generation. The expressed in mythology, the dreaded family curse. There are, of course, different ways of learning different things. We learn language in a different way that we learn to ride a bike. To learn the pathologos requires that we become convinced. This is something that we're also seeing in the Mino as we're reading that on this channel. Convinced. Not something we recognize ourselves, but something we are convinced. We have to become convinced about the truth of some belief. Not of any belief, but a fundamental belief about our own worthiness and the integrity of our reality. The acceptance of a pathologos means we have been convinced by someone that we are ignorant about our own very being and deluded about what we regard as real. And they know us. I know you better than you know yourself. They know us and the reality that confronts us better than we know ourselves. So what are they doing? They are cosplaying a knower. They are bullshitting. They want to be a knower because we all really want to know. That's why we're in the game of philosophy. But instead of actually doing philosophy and midwifery, they can just pretend because kids don't know better. Well, they do know better, but we can convince them because they're reliant upon us that we know better. Undermine their own thinking. Okay? Cosplaying the knower. I'm sure you've seen people in your own lives who have a certain way of being that they'll want people to believe means that they know stuff. Somebody must have appeared very convincing and that can only have occurred if someone had appeared as a knower. There we go, there's the knower. With such skill that the appearance itself becomes idolized. So those people who act like they know shit they don't, there's a certain appearance that they're imitating. Oh, if I act like that, if I yell at people, or if I act like the silent type, if I act abusively, if I start arguments, that's what it means to know, to be knowing. That's what my dear ma and pa did. And my grandparents and my great-grandparents and so on. Through that drama, the message was believed. The idealized image in the drama becomes the object to be imitated. That's what we seek. So we become zombies, playing out situations so we can arrive at arrive at a scene, arrive at a drama, arrive at the conditions for us to cosplay that image. Because it's a standard for what will be judged as knowing. Imitation of enlightenment. So this is, everyone's doing this. But really, We learn in philosophy that knowing itself is the goal of the dialectic, the goal of our philosophy. So we're all philosophers, only this nasty bugger has gotten in the way. We are seeking for conditions where we can play out this imitation of this way of being instead of the real state of enlightenment, the real state of knowing. So isn't it interesting that the conditions for our problems are actually the conditions for enlightenment? If we didn't have the condition for our problems, we would be living in an unjust universe because we would be lacking the conditions within ourself and reality for enlightenment. We would have evolved from being and the self and be stuck in this physical world with no ability in our lifetime to know knowing, to know being, to know the object of knowing, reality, being, and to go beyond that. The thing is, the conditions for this enlightenment that we seek through philosophy, that we gain through philosophy, also is the conditions for our problem. The only difference is we take out the truth about knowing and the truth about the self and we replace it with this image, idealized image from this drama that we were convinced about. Isn't that interesting? You could say, well, doesn't it suck that we have problems? That human beings are unwittingly a walking dialectic for what is false and harmful? And unless they discover philosophical midwifery and they have the courage to accept the quest, they're going to be stuck in this problem their whole lives and pass it on like a disease. Doesn't that mean our reality sucks? Well, actually, if you take away the conditions for this, you are taking away the conditions for actual enlightenment. So necessarily, having a problem in a weird way shows us the integrity of the world that we live in, the goodness of our reality. We just got something in the way. Isn't that curious? The transmission of a belief from one person to another requires a special, unique kind of situation. There are several factors that must be brought together before the transmission of the Pathologos can take place. So let's review them. If we're just curious that our own youthful openness and receptivity was the condition for the transmission of the Pathologos. Is that similar to what we've been learning about the dialectic and philosophy? Do we have to be genuinely curious about philosophy, genuinely curious about the logos, the dialectic, and being? Is it enthusiastic when you get into philosophy to realize that you can drop religion and belief and opinion and bollocks like that to actually understand that which is most important? That's exciting. To know that you can understand, and everyone can understand because understanding is universal. And not only can you understand, you can verify it in your own direct experience. Enlightenment isn't just something for anime or for Eastern mythological stories. It's for you right now. And you don't have to, carry water up a mountain for 40 years because some old Asian guy with a long beard in a white robe is telling you to gain enlightenment. No, you just understand that which is most interesting. Philosophy, the words of Socrates, midwifery. That's exciting. And that youthful openness and receptivity that we get from that excitement, which is the condition for us to be in the game of philosophy, was also one of the conditions for the transmission of the Pathologos when we were young. The event or stage upon which the drama unfolded could only be convincing if we were the object of the lesson. So there's another, let's write this down actually. The factors for the transmission. Got half a blackboard. Let's make a full blackboard. Okay. Chapter 2, number 2, conditions for the transmission. We've seen our youthful openness. Okay. And if you've seen other people in the game of philosophy, even though they might be elderly, they have that same youthful openness. People might say it's a childlike wonder and quality they have. And receptivity. And then we have another condition. We have to be the object of the lesson. We are the object of lesson. We are the only person in the audience. Only person in audience. Okay. Those acting out their roles had to convince us that they really knew our reality, and all of this would fail if it did not include the idea it was done for our benefit. Okay. So I've got two more. They have to convince us they really, what do they really do? Know us. Know what? They know us and reality. Our reality. And all of this would fail if it did not include the idea it was. Now, the word is new, so let's keep the word new because there may be a significance that Pierre is using the past tense. Maybe because we have to discover something in the present about what we're carrying from the past and realize that it was false. They didn't know. Back then, they didn't know. The idea that it was done for our benefit. Now this is curious. We were just talking about today, just now, the symmetry and the relationship between what we do here in what's false in our problem and what we're doing in philosophy. The path of understanding to enlightenment. And okay, I just had to turn up my volume a little bit. So we're just talking about how it relates to what we're doing in philosophy, but look at these key terms. Benefit. The word benefit. Now this is one of the puzzles we have in philosophy. What makes something beneficial? What makes something good? We don't know this yet. Isn't it wild that we don't know what benefit is, because that's one of the subjects of philosophy that we are pursuing. What actually benefits us, really? And all of the characters that reflect on what's good and beneficial with Socrates start not knowing. Convinced they know, but wrong. That's us. At least before we get into philosophy. So isn't it curious that the nature of reality, the nature of us, the nature of benefit, the nature of knowingness, these are all terms stolen from philosophy and imitated and used for our pathologos. Isn't it wild? So therefore, the more that we know what these words actually are in our reading of philosophy, the better we can answer these people and say, you guys were wrong. That's not beneficial. That's not self. That's not reality. That's not what it means to know. So we have to be doing philosophy alongside midwifery, because they're misusing the terms. And if we gain an understanding of the terms, we can say, oh, that's stupid. You're stupid. Get out of here with that. Isn't that interesting? What's also interesting is as we learn philosophy, Socrates talks over and over about the people who claim to be philosophers. Socrates was put to death in part because of a prejudice against philosophy, because the people who claim to be philosophers aren't doing philosophy but are doing the exact opposite. That's the same in our world. People who claim to be philosophers are just in the realm of opinion. The physical opinions, Kant's opinions, Hegel's opinions, red pill opinions, alpha podcast opinions. These people who want to be professional knowers, are actually professional opinion havers, life coaches. These people claim to be philosophers, but they're not doing what Socrates is defining philosophy as. They are stealing the language and usurping it for what's false, without knowing, without the knowledge and the understanding of self and reality. Think about all the philosophers you come across on YouTube and in your life and academics. How many of them recognize philosophy as to understand and experience the nature of self and reality, which is non-physical? I haven't seen a college that teaches that. They teach it as some sort of opinion exercise. How do you win debates? How do you remember all these old people's opinions, dead people's opinions? Nothing about what's true, nothing about reality. So, isn't it interesting? The same thing we're seeing here, a stealing or a usurping of these terms used to imitate what's knowing, happens in our childhood, but becomes a way of being even for those who take up the mantle, take up the title of philosopher, which we have to recognize as we learn. Isn't that curious? I think so. Fascinating game we're in. Okay, when these things come together, the entire presentation becomes an ideal that we model and imitate. For all the drama, we do not know what it is we must believe. Okay? The entire presentation becomes the ideal. The whole thing. The entire, let's spell that better. Entire presentation becomes the ideal. So whatever was done to us, we seek to imitate it and do it to others. The golden rule, do unto others what was done unto you. We imitate. Isn't that interesting? Right? And for all this, we don't even know what we must believe. Move this over a little bit. We don't even know, since we are left to conclude for ourselves. Isn't that interesting? For all that drama, for all that work and skill and craft put into doing what's so negative, taking advantage of youthful receptiveness and openness and receptivity, making someone the target of the lesson, the only one in the audience, trying to convince us that they really knew us and our reality. Maybe not theirs, maybe not, our reality. Convince us that they're doing so for our benefit. That entire creating this freaking drama that we imitate at various levels in our life in various different ways. For all that drama, for all that effort, for all that entire presentation and effort and work and everything it took for them to get that, we walk away not even knowing what we must believe because we are left to conclude for ourselves. Isn't that interesting? Yes, it is. Now we must see how each of these elements produce the pathologos. And why it is so difficult to free oneself from the influence of the pathologos. How does it create it? Why is it so difficult to get free? We all want to be free. Now, speaking of the relationship between midwifery and enlightenment, there are different qualities or stages of enlightenment. Okay, and I'm going to use a metaphor that some people might be familiar with. Okay, one of them is the actual object of knowledge, the brilliant light of being that we seek in philosophy. But there's another quality or state which is called freedom or clarity. So you might say, if you're into anime, let's say, Luffy using his devil powers and becoming very powerful might be devil fruit powers, might be the knowingness, the brilliant light of being. But his Gear 5 stage, freedom, is even better. Or let's use Dragon Ball Z. To go Super Saiyan, to be in a state of being where you're filled with that golden light of pure being, Super Saiyan. That's the stage. But then beyond that, there's Ultra Instinct, which doesn't have all of the fireworks, but has a immense level of effortlessness and freedom. Ultra Instinct. Now I bring that up now because we want to become free. So we can see the necessity for philosophical midwifery in any spiritual tradition that seeks that higher level of enlightenment beyond even that experience of the brilliant light of being, which is what we saw earlier. Well, earlier in the text we saw, we read Pierre saying, it's a necessity to have midwifery along with any spiritual tradition. This might be one of the reasons why. Freedom. Ultra Instinct, Gear 5, effortlessness, freedom from our problems. That requires something more than just an experience, just a drug trip, just a meditation experience. Whatever it is, however you got it, sitting on the mat. And isn't it cool that we have been given in this text what we need to become free? The answer to that is yes. So cool. Oh my God, so cool. Trey cool. So let's bring up the highlighter and get to highlighting. Okay. How do those elements produce the pathologos, and why is it so difficult to become free of its influence. Before a situation can have its effect upon us, these factors must be present. To begin with, there must be people who are significant to us. People who are playing out a particular role. And we, for our part, must be in a sensitive and open state of mind. Okay? Significant people playing out a particular role while we are in a sensitive and open state of mind. To conclude, as we did, for these factors to come together is unusual. It's rare and these are marked in contrast to our everyday familial world. Contrast to everyday familial world. So this is the unusualness, the rarity of this kind of event. Right? Our most formative learning takes place under the authority of the family. It is here that we learn from our guardians. Authority of the family. That the false beliefs of the family and clan. Okay? Family and clan. So, isn't it interesting that similar kind of brainwashing happens within authority figures in all other aspects of our life? If your understanding of what's true is not based on the logos and your own recognition through the dialectic and verification through your own experience, and instead you're quoting authority figures, the founding fathers said this, Kant said this, Hegel said this, the Bible says this, the Quran says this, the Vedic scripture says this, the Torah says this. You are under the authority of a family or clan. Isn't it interesting? The kinds of things that prevent our own understanding, development, and unification under what's objective, understanding, and knowledge. The things that cause our division seems to be a playing out of the same kinds of patterns of our early pathologos. What a curious species we are. Okay? We learn under their guardianship, and what we learn is maintained within the walls of the home. So, we are dependent upon them in some way, and it's maintained within the walls of the home. So not only do they pass it on, they work hard to maintain that conclusion. They went to all that effort to lead us to make. One's home has been called one's castle, and indeed, within its walls, guardians rule with a strange and powerful authority. Okay? So we have a saying, your home is your castle. We do play out a kind of guardianship or kingship or rulership in a strange and powerful way within the walls, which, when you think about it, is kind of screwed up. You're just a little baby, and you're stuck within these walls, and any old idiot can have a kid and play out his own idea of what it means to be a king of your castle. King of the castle, king of the castle. That's a Borat impression. That was very good. King of the castle, king of the castle. So when he's making fun of somebody for having a chair. Oh, a chair. Look at me on my chair. King of the castle, king of the castle. We're saying, ooh, you've got a child. Ooh, king of the castle, king of the castle. It is from these authorities that we learn our pathologos. From these authorities, we learn our pathologos. To have been convinced about something so fundamental as a basic belief of oneself is not easily duplicated. How did the authorities gain their power, their authority and power to convince? I know they studied for a long time in philosophy. They read a lot of Socratic texts along with this channel. and they join the Discord and talk with their friends about what they're learning and the dialectic that they're learning in philosophy applied to self and being. And also they spend a lot of time doing midwifery and dream analysis to discover and remove what's false. That has given them the authority and power to be a good ruler, or as Socrates says, a philosopher king. Oh no, wait, no one does that, do they? Wah-wah.
That's one for the blooper. That's one for the blooper reel.
So it can't be from what actually would give it authority and power. So where does it come from? We learn many things from many people without imitating the convincer. To have idolized the convincer into something so ideal that the convincer becomes an object for imitation is more than strange. But it becomes far more strange when we realize that the act of convincing and that belief, the act of convincing and the belief become elevated into the standard for knowing and knowledge itself. Wow, isn't that interesting? It makes a lot of sense. So in philosophy, we read about what is knowing. It's a big question. What is knowing? Why does Socrates in the Meno say he doesn't know what virtue is? Could it be that virtue isn't an object of knowing? Well, what is an object of knowing? Socrates does say, what makes me, this is one of the most misquoted things about Socrates. You'll see it in a Facebook post every now and again. Socrates is wise because he said he doesn't know anything. So therefore, I don't know anything, so I can pretend I'm as wise as Socrates. Bollocks, that's not what it says. The actual quote is, I am wisest because I'm not going to be convinced I know something that is unknowable. Most people think they know things which aren't even knowable. What makes me wiser is I'm not going to make that mistake because I know what knowledge is. So he does know what knowledge is. What is knowledge? What is knowable? And why is it that Socrates is so wise? Simply because he's not going to convince things that are unknowable as being knowable. See how important recognizing what is actually knowing and knowledge is? Such that if you know what is actually knowledge, you're going to be the smartest person in Athens like Socrates. So it must be rare to actually know what is knowing and knowledge. But we all seek knowledge, then what are we doing instead? If we aren't reading Socrates, if we're not reading the Meno, how are we getting this idea of what knowledge is? Well, the convincer becomes the object of imitation and the act of convincing and that belief. So the act of convincing like they did, proselytizing, putting someone down, abusing someone, preaching, whoever it is, convincing others of your nonsense, and the belief itself, these two things become elevated into the standard for knowing and knowledge. So this big quest that we should be on that makes Socrates such a mystery, what is actually knowable, no need to do that. Just imitate this belief. This belief is the standard. And trying to convince others of that belief, those two things are the standard. Isn't that interesting? At a young age, you get something which is right in the place where our curiosity should be. The thing that takes us into philosophy. What is knowable? That question that Socrates wants us to have. Something gets in the way. Oh no, I know what it's knowing. This belief I got when I was a kid. And the way of trying to convince others. Yelling at people. You better believe me. Hey, maybe there's a certain head shake that means you know stuff. Maybe there's a knowing smirk. Maybe there's a sinister smile. Maybe there's a disdainful look down at someone. Whatever it is, that seems to be a convincing standard of knowing. Which one of those fits your family? Or your culture? Or your country? The head shake? the silent treatment, the loud arguing, the threats of fisticuffs, the racist beliefs, sexist jargon? What is it that in your culture or family or society is this way of being that seems to be a marker for knowing? And we can also go one step further and ask, hang on a second, aren't there some politicians in different countries that are absolute tyrants, fascists, clowns, comically stupid, comically ignorant, that we look out from different countries and go, how did they get liked by anyone? They're obviously ignorant of everything and think they know. Could it be that their style of convincing others of their beliefs matches a common style within the families of that country or society? How does that help us make sense of how dictators and tyrants come into power? Did Hitler's way of convincing people that he knows stuff match something that might have been common within at least 40% of German households? When their parents acted like they know stuff? Look how convincing I am when I do this and I talk in this way. How about Donald Trump? He's comically ignorant. Does the way he talk is racist rhetoric, is accusing other people, is playing the victim, is trying to scam people for money. His use of everything is the best, everything is the most beautiful. Is that an American way of being? Excessive compliments, pretending to be something you're not, excessive individualism, care for myself over others, valuing money and fame more than anything else. Lots of racism and sexism, appealing to religious brainwashing nonsense even though you're not religious. Are these all hallmarks within their culture? Hard to see if you're in it. Could that be why he's liked by 40% of the population? Imitates the ideal within the family? Now you try it. Pick another dictator or fascist that is comically unjust or comically ignorant and ask the question, is this where it comes from? Isn't it curious that even what it seems to be terribly unjust and irrational, actually there's a rationality behind it? Not just within the fascists and political system, but within ourselves. Our own unjust problems. What keeps us repeating things that are devastating, destructive, harmful, things that are killing us? Isn't that terrible? Isn't that mean? Isn't that unjust that we have these things? Irrational? Oh, isn't it curious that there is a rational behind what appears to be most irrational? Isn't that neat? Our problems are understandable. No need to shoot people. I think it's neat. I think it's very neat. Okay, it is this mystery that we must make clear. What mystery? Why do we elevate the act of convincing and the belief that we are convincing about? Why do we elevate that as the standard for knowing and knowledge? Let's make it clear. Consider. We know that when someone breaks free of the usual course of the pattern of their life. Oh, okay. Do we know that? Someone breaks free? Yeah, I guess so. Billy doesn't act like Billy anymore. Or what we thought Billy was. We know when someone shifts into playing an author. Oh, here we go. We know when someone shifts. So we know when someone breaks. Oops. Okay. These colors. There we go. Right? We know when someone breaks free from the usual course and pattern in life. We know when somebody shifts. We know when someone shifts into playing an authority role and insists that some belief of his or hers is true. Right? You're hanging out with Billy or Janie and they're just doing their thing. They're usually good company. Then all of a sudden there's a shift. And then they're insisting, no, you can't believe this. I insist this is true. And you have to, otherwise you are a bad child. You'll go to hell. Jesus will smite you. Don't you realize that makes you a bad person? Or I'm very disappointed in you. I'm very angry at you. Or all of these kinds of things that are hallmarks of an authority role that they're stepping into when they insist that a certain belief is true. We see that when we do philosophy, don't we? Someone can be going along really nicely with our reading and the channel, learning, and then all of a sudden there's something which seems to rub up against a certain false belief. And they say no, and then all of a sudden they've gone from their open, curious, wondering state of mind and the other virtues they're practicing, openness, courage, temperance, wisdom, they've lost all their temperance. They've lost all their courage to follow the logos. They've lost the wisdom, the desire of the logos. They've lost the justice, trying to employ the dialectic at all times. And they start insisting on this critter here. No, this is the boundary here and no further. Why? Because of this belief. Weren't you the most curious? Now, that can be very funny sometimes. Like when I study with Dr. Grimes myself, there would be people who were very open and curious and they'd make a lot of progress. And then all of a sudden they'd say, no, not this one. And they'd say, no, this belief is the true one. And it would be very puzzling because there would be some, 20, 30-year-old kid talking to a 80-year-old master of philosophy and insisting this is right. And hopefully there was some good people around and they would be asking, well, hang on a second, why do you think that? No reasons, or no good ones. It's just, I'm just insisting that it's true. Then you say, hang on a second, you've only been in the game for a year or two. There's a lot more that you can ask about. Nope, don't need to ask. I know, this belief is true. It can be very funny. But also, in the tragic way, because you don't want them to jump out of the game. And it's human. We all have that. We shift into an authority role and insist upon something at the expense of conversation, dialogue. Nope, not listening anymore. And that's been a puzzle for me too, because I'm someone who loves to understand and loves dialogue. And I've been in conversations where it's been going great. And then all of a sudden this comes along and their state of mind changes. And I say, well, why are you shifting into being an authority figure? And you know that it's wrong because you've been in the game too for a long time. And you shift into this authority figure and insisting. And there's a paradigm for understanding if you're in a problem. When are you shutting down conversation? When are you saying no more logos? Now, I'm very familiar with it because in my culture and family and religion and upbringing, that happens very early. There's never any talking. Which is terrible because you don't want to have a problem and not talk about it or take too long to talk about it. So it comes up very early. So for me to get into the game, a lot of the people there's a bit of a personal tangent, but who cares? For me to get into the game as somebody from Australia, when most of the people that we are reading about here were in California, America, lots of talking aloud, like we were just describing of Trump, lots of talking, lots of building people up, lots of compliments, Lots of individualism. Very happy with using the superlatives like beautiful, like Trump. That, oh, this is the most beautiful. Oh, it's the best. I'm the best at everything. These are things that we actually study. What is beauty? What is the best? What is the good? So it's completely comfortable within their culture. Not over here if you're in Australia or England even, but Australia is where I was from. So just for me to be in the game with all these people, I had to overcome this block to reason very quickly or figure out a way of pushing through. So my block was all the way down here, right down the beginning, no talking at all. Because you one of those smart talking dudes reading the books. You grab a beer, and in Australia, it's very common to all of the words that are appreciated in American culture, where Pierre Grimes was living and the NS was developing this understanding. It's the exact opposite in Australian culture. You would be looked at as crazy if you use things like good and beautiful and true and you thought good of people. It's a mark of affection to use the absolute worst words. The C word that's the meme in internet culture. Australians use the worst word, but it's supposedly really good. And we think it's very funny that we consider the absolute worst words of the language to be affectionate or positive. It's not funny. It's friggin' tragic. Think about it. Imagine if you expressed love and affection to a child and you use the absolute worst, most degrading and denigrating words that you can use. What kind of image would they think of themselves? The worst. What kind of reality would they consider themselves in if that's what it means to be living? Your loved ones to use the worst language about you. If you need to talk about what's most meaningful to you to reach your goals, you can't reach your goals unless you're talking about what's most meaningful. What happens if you talk about what's most meaningful? You get crushed. They call it taking the piss. You got to find out what someone's interested in, and then you use it to bully them, and so on. Very, very standard. It's like a funny internet meme about Australian culture. But for me, as someone in that culture, to even get to the level where I was learning about this stuff, I had to do a lot of work. A lot of work on my own, because who else in Australia is doing this? Hopefully soon it'll become more mainstream. Pierre would say it's the ideas of the previous generation that characterizes the next one. So Pierre has left us this year, sadly. Meaning it's only right that we take these ideas and we make them our new culture. So, for that reason, when I was talking with these people whose block was much further along, because that's their culture, it became very obvious when it came up. Oh, you're just shutting down conversation. I know that. I had to address that very quickly. It's easy. You do this. The pattern of way of being that you're in that makes you love philosophy and talking and conversation all of a sudden shifts. Now you're playing some authority role. You're in a negative state of mind. You're angry. You're telling people to shut up. You're telling people to get out, etc., etc. Very different than what you were a minute ago. It's no different. I've seen them. That's Australian culture, my friend. And because you're in this game, you know that when this happens, when this block to the logos, when this shift that we are reading about happens, it's evidence, it's a signal that you are rubbing up against a fundamental false belief that is defending itself. That's the Pathologos. So you can be curious about that. You can be excited. Oh, look, did you notice this? Get excited, my friend, because this is what you're here to uncover, to get to Gear 5, to get to Ultra Instinct, to get to be free. You can't make them, of course. You can invite them. How about we have a conversation? How about we reflect? How about all of those principles we've been learning about philosophical midwifery and philosophy, how about we use them when we most need them? And when do we most need them? Right now. Invitation. So, you might notice that yourself. If you're interested in this game, if you're watching this video, then you're probably someone further along, and you might talk to somebody whose false beliefs are way back here. You might see how easily it is for them to say, no, shut up. I insist that this belief is true. And you say, hang on a second. I've been learning about this idea in philosophy, and I don't think you have. What makes you think that what you're saying is true? Look at the way in which I insist on it. Isn't that a mark of knowing? You idiot. You fathead. So, especially if you're gaining value from philosophy and midwifery, you want to share it with your friends and loved ones. So you might recognize that happening. So be aware. And also yourself. We want to surface it in ourselves. So we need to be in the game of philosophy, going along this logos until we surface this. If our block's up here, it's no use going along philosophy to get to just here. Oh, look at all the goals I reached using philosophy and midwifery. I can reach all these goals. My block was down here, but now I can do all these things. Keep going. Keep going, because your block as a philosopher, as someone with the soul more inclined to philosophy, if you're watching this, your block might be way up here. Stay in the game. In other words, keep the conversation alive. This is a successive refinement incrementally through dialogue and reflection. It's a conversation. It's a relationship. Keep it going. But what if this guy comes up, this false belief, and says, no, this is far enough? Then you need your virtues. You need courage. You need to keep your cool, temperance. You need courage to keep going even though it's there. Wisdom to keep seeking the understanding and the dialectic and the logos. Justice to treat yourself fairly. You need all those virtues you've been practicing for right when this comes up. And then keep going. And what do you know? You'll gain an understanding that you can use to get rid of that. And we will all be happy. And then, if you've gotten this far and you've gained benefit from this channel and your friends and the community, then, and you've done this, then come back and help us. Share your insights, share your understanding. Whatever practice that you've gone to have to get through your block, take that experience, reflect on it, understand it, and take that expertise to come back to us, because our blocks might be back here. Practice this midwifery with us to help others along. You don't have to, but it might be nice if you did. So let's keep reading. We know when someone shifts into playing that authority role and insists that some belief of his or hers is true. When we ourselves take the knower role, we know that others are not likely to share in our personal beliefs. Okay? When we take the knower role, others are not likely to share in our personal beliefs. So when we have to start insisting it, and are likely to disagree with us. We know that not many people really care what we think. This is another thing why you need to have why the absurdity of the way we raise children in a prison, in a box. Because no one cares about your way of being. No one cares about your dumb opinions. Except the kids who have to, because they're stuck there. There's also the absurdity of sending people like, there are some religious traditions that take like 15-year-olds, kids, and say, go door to door and act the knower in front of these much older people and tell them about what self and reality is. Jehovah's Witnesses, sometimes they're called. That's terrible. Because no one cares about your dumb beliefs. What we care about is understanding and verifying the understanding ourselves in direct experience, nous, knowledge, and becoming free of our false beliefs. So why are you sending kids to knock door to door to play that role? I wonder. Okay, so when we take that role, we know that they're not going to share in our personal beliefs and they're likely to disagree with us. We know that not many people really care what we think. Let's highlight that. Not many, whoops. Yellow. Not many people really care what we think. Who cares what you think? unless it happens to challenge their own way of being. Right? It's another problem with capitalism. Someone owns a store and you have to work there because you're poor. And all of a sudden they act like their opinions are important. And you got to pretend that you're interested in their dumb opinions. Petty tyrants, they're called. But normally, if you're not like stuck under them, people don't care about your own opinions unless it happens to challenge the way of being. That's interesting because what we learn in philosophy and what we learn in midwifery will eventually challenge our pathologos, our way of being. That's what it's designed to do. Thus, we may have difficulty finding situations where we share our most fundamental beliefs. Difficulty share our most fundamental beliefs with others. Further, when we do, we can't be sure our beliefs will be treated with the respect with which we treat them. But for all this uncertainty and difficulty, we know that we are likely to enjoy playing the knower. We know we're likely to enjoy playing the knower, even though they're probably not going to share our ways of beliefs. Probably people aren't going to respect our beliefs the way we do. But even though we really want to cosplay as the knower, our soul wants it so much. Our soul doesn't want the cosplay, of course. It wants the real thing, but people like to play the knower, don't they? And of course, we know about the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less opportunity that people have to actually know because they are blocked from actually learning, the more closed-minded and ignorant, the more they will enjoy pretending. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The more confident you are in your stupidity. And we can see us because we all want to be the knower, but what about the people who can't actually learn things because they're blocked? Okay. Situations where we share our fundamental beliefs with others. So what? Well, we want to play the knower. We want to play the knower. We play it out because there is something uplifting about playing the knower role. Interesting. Despite all that, we get uplifted. Right? And here's just from my own personal experience. Here's a good tip. Whenever somebody says, "Can I give you some advice?" Advice, you say? You mean your own personal advice? Just means your beliefs. And you get to play the knower, which will be uplifting for you. Get the hell out of here. Someone says that, run. So, if someone, it's a good indication that they're going to be doing this. Cosplaying that knower role, which is their problem, which is an imitation of the same problem done to them. Normally, you won't care about it. If you do, ugh. So if someone says, "Can I give you some advice?" Never see Socrates say that. Then my advice to you is run for the hills. That's a joke. I don't want you to take that as advice. We are understanding how and why we would want to ourselves run for the hills. That was just a very funny joke that I made. It was excellent. Only the best jokes. Only the funniest jokes. That's my Trump impression. I wish I hadn't made it. It was terrible. I didn't even try and do a voice. Ooh. There is a certain intensity at these times. Whoa, we get intensity. Yum. And we feel proud. Wow, look how proud I am. Let me give you advice, son. All right there, son. Let me tell you about the world. All right. Look. I'm so noble. Look at me with my advice. Look how important I am, my son. Listen to me, my son. Right, let me tell you how the world is. Wow, you did a lot of philosophy? Nah, mate, didn't have to. I learned it from the school of hard knocks. Let me give you some advice. Right? You give me 50. Oh, I was trying to think, what's another way of being that's cliche of this? All right, no more impressions. There's a certain intensity. We feel proud, we feel noble, we feel important. So if we can't do it before one group, we're likely to try it out in others. So if we can't do it for one group, try it out on others. All right. How you like? You want to listen to my dumb opinions? No, get out of here. That's just dumb. You're just imitating some tough guy from a Jason Statham movie. All right then, my son. I'm going to give you a bunch of knucks if you don't give me 50 quid, my son. Get out of here. All right, I'll find another group. I'll find another group to try out this tough way of being. If they go, oh wow, you're so cool and tough. Right. Yep, I am. And I was thinking of more Jason Statham quotes, but I can't. All right, try it in front of others. We don't buy it over here, but I'll find another group who does. Thus, let us consider our condition. We know that there are few times, this is our condition. We know that there are very few times when we can give voice to what is most vital to us. We've been making fun of this way of being, but it is most vital to us. We really, really want to be this thing. It's dictated our lives to try and find a situation where we can be knowing. Now that's philosophy, but the imitation has taken over our lives. Fate. That's why we call it fate and not destiny. Our silence makes us strangers to ourselves. This is even more tragic. If we don't have an opportunity to put voice on what's most important, we'll become a stranger to ourselves. That's negative too. So we want a situation where we can voice what's most meaningful while learning philosophical midwifery to address the times when it's what's negative, and learn philosophy to encourage the dialectical reflection and understanding if it's true. In other words, we want to voice what's most meaningful. To surface what's false and to learn what's true. Okay? We are often unaware of how strongly we hold to our most basic beliefs about ourselves. We don't know how addicted we are, how loyal we are. Equally, we are only dimly aware that we have come to personal conclusions about the significance of this reality we experience. So, two things. We don't know how strongly we hold to the false beliefs about ourselves, and we don't know, we're only dimly aware, so there's a little bit more awareness about the significance of the reality we experience. Self and reality. We need to voice them. Speak up. Speak. Philosopher, speak. Where's my sound effect? Now, of course, we don't just want to speak. We need to speak to engage in the logos, but then we also have to reflect on whether or not it's true. And so we say, philosopher, speak. And then a philosopher says, just like that. And some philosophers say, meow. There you go. See? What may be even more surprising is that we guard jealousy. Ugh, do we what? What do? Some more surprising is we guard jealously the strong opinion about how we are to be and appear in this reality we experience. So we're making fun about a guy who's like, all right, my son, let me give you some advice, right? I mean, what a dope way of being. What are you? You're not Jason Statham, and Jason Statham don't know anything about philosophy. We don't know. It's surprising how jealously we guard the opinion about how we want to be and appear. I want people to think I'm a big tough guy like that. Right? No, that's not helpful. Just giving people advice, sharing your opinions, convincing people of your personal beliefs. That's not helping anything. Roar! Shut up! I'll give you a bunch of knucks. That's exactly what they say. I'll give you a bunch of knucks. That's Jason Statham speak for I will punch you with my knucks. All right, isn't it interesting? We're dimly aware that we how strongly we hold to our false beliefs about ourselves, and we're only just a little bit aware of the significance that we have come to certain conclusions about this reality, false conclusions about reality too. And it's surprising how jealously we guard the way we want to be appeared. Now, if you're interested, well, if you are familiar with gossip and social media, it might not be so surprising how strongly and jealously we want our appearance to be a certain way. Someone's gossiping about us. Oh, no, that's not the way I am. I want to be appearing this way. And that's why I have 15 filters on my Instagram photos. Biting social commentary. All right. So we are tied to how we want to appear. And of course we do. If knowledge and knowing is tied to a certain appearance we're imitating, no doy, of course we want to appear a certain way. Or maybe avoid appearing a certain way if we fear that ignorant way of knowing because we've seen through it and we've seen how terrible it is. That could be a block in a different kind of a way. But that's a talk for later. So, it so happens that we find ourselves in situations where we can express what we believe and feel about life. When we do find that, we seize them. When we find ourselves in situations where we can express what we believe and feel about life, we seize them. Yes. I get to be a preacher on the pulpit? Gotcha. Lordy, I think that the men should do this and the women should do this, and Lord spoke to me and he said you need to do this, and oh, I love how this feels. All these people listening to my opinions, oh, I can seize them. This is what I believe, and those scientists say you need to have understanding and proof, but I have feeling and I have faith. That means belief. Faith means I agree with all of my own beliefs that I have. Oh, everyone's listening to me. We seize them. Even if we take the opportunity to express ourselves, we can't be sure the audience will accept our message. Even if we can't be sure the audience will accept our message. But there is one receptive audience. One receptive audience. There are people who will listen and care about what we say, and they will offer little, if any, opposition or counter arguments, and that audience is the farm animals. No, that audience is the family. It is with our own children and those young ones in our care that we express our deepest concerns. Right? Let me tell you about the way the world is going down the toilet. Let me tell you about those free-thinking intellectuals. Let me tell you about what women are like, etc. So we arrange special times. Now, what we're not saying we shouldn't express our concerns, but in a certain kind of way that isn't imitating this loyalty and certainty to what is false and ignorant. We want to reflect openly. That's the dialectic that we're learning. With reason. In a relationship, in a conversation. The opposite of what we're seeing here. That's important. Okay, so we arrange special times for them to learn about our worries and beliefs. It's before them that we present what is most personally significant. Here is our captive audience. And we feel justified. We feel justified. Do we what? And just delete that. No, delete that. Oh, we feel justified. Now that's a highlighter. That's not what I've been using. We feel justified. When we communicate these highly regarded beliefs of ours. And we do so with sincerity and power because we believe we are doing it for their benefit. What? I thought the game was to convince them that we're doing it for their benefit. They convinced us that they really know and they're doing it for our benefit. But here we're reading that when we finally get an opportunity to do this thing we've been seeking and rarely get an opportunity to do, unless you're a petty tyrant capitalist or you are a head of a church of some kind and you can just spout your ignorance and everyone will clap. This rare opportunity we can seize, we're going to get little pushback of expressing what we are most worried about or most believe. We think we're doing it for their benefit? That's interesting. In these special times and situations, the knower in us emerges. Ooh. And those special times become memorable because they have been made significant. So these are the special moments in our life with our children or those under our care. They're significant moments. Interesting. And it's in this way we've made them significant. Ooh. From situations like these, we come to see that those guardians who were most significant to us, from situations like these, come to see those guardians who were significant to us cared. They cared. They cared enough to emerge as knowing. Now, what we have been looking at this as terrible and mean and stupid. Screw you for passing on your ignorance to me as was done to you. But here we can see that those who actually did this to us, played this game, this charade out to us, that became our imitation of what it means to be knowing, that keeps us bound to our problems and ignorance in our life, keeps us stuck and limited. That stinks. But actually, in another way of looking at it, they cared enough to emerge as knowing. They really thought they were doing it for our benefit. Oh. In those moments, they appear authoritarian, certain, powerful, and of course, in control. Now, we've been asking, how come Hitler and Putin and Trump are all ignorant and they just act like fascists, but people still support them somehow? Tolerate them, at least. Support them or tolerate them. And even Trump famously loves authoritarians, loves people who appear certain, powerful, and in control. Dictators and fascists from around the world. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that the opposite of American freedom? Where did we get it from? This image that these worst kinds of people are actually most loving and caring and beneficial and knowing. Here we're getting the origin. Isn't that interesting? Yes. They were believable by being authoritarian and certain. I can't change my mind. By the way, in philosophy, in the Parmenides, when Socrates first learned philosophy, Parmenides outlined this to Socrates. He said, hey Socrates, by the way, you're just a 19-year-old kid starting your journey. But let me tell you something. And I'll bring up the quote here. Here we go. One who hears these words, says Parmenides to Socrates, and questions whether selves exist. So the selves that we actually think, not the false idea of selves, or, by the way, selves are the aspects of reality. It's the object that we actually want to know in being. Okay, and we're contrasting that with the false conclusions about our reality that we get in these origin scenes. Okay, so and so we want to actually understand and know them in philosophy, not have false beliefs based on imitation of authoritarian knowers. We can actually understand it so long as we get rid of what we're learning about here. She says, okay, if that's what we want to seek, the beings, then we have to be puzzled and we have to question, hang on, do these actual truths and beings in reality exist? And if they do exist in the highest degree, so that it appears abundantly necessary that selves must be unknown by human nature. Some people think that we can't know reality. There is no knowing, there's just opinion. So just being certain, like Trump, like our parents or whatever, is the best way. Like the debate bros, like the people who claim to be knowers in the right-wing griftosphere or on universities and things. Okay, they wonder if there is a reality that we do in philosophy. Whoops. They'll think it's unknowable by human nature. And whoever speaks in this way says you can't know reality, just believe my advice, may appear to say something important, appear to be saying something important, and be thought of as being an extraordinary statement. And one of the ways they appear that way, both themselves and their statement, is that they are remaining themselves, unable to be persuaded. This is a problem that Parmenides says to Socrates, this is what happened. So that he goes on to say, this is the greatest puzzle, Socrates. Even if you do follow the proof through philosophy and the dialectic, through many elaborate details, from one practiced and experienced, like Socrates turned out to be himself, and someone with natural talent in the dialectic, even then, he who contends that the idea selves, being, reality, are unknowable, may still remain unpersuaded. This is what Parmenides himself identifies as the greatest puzzle. If you are convinced you can't know anything that's true in being, you can't experience a non-physical being reality. You can't know what the soul is. You can't know what God is. You can't know ultimate reality. You can't know everything all at once. It's just beliefs and opinions. Even if you believe that, even if you get into philosophy, if you haven't addressed that belief, you can get stuck. Even if you're doing philosophy on this channel, even if it's with a Socrates-like dialectician who can walk you through all of the steps and reasoning and arguments through many elaborate details, someone with natural skill and ability, even then, if you haven't addressed the false beliefs about reality, you will be stuck. Even Parmenides recognized the Pathologos. And he said, by the way, the thing that makes that nonsense believable is that they appeared to be saying something important, and their belief appeared to be thought of as an extraordinary statement because they are themselves unable to be persuaded, certain, authoritarian, can't change their mind. That's the appearance that made the belief that you can't know the nature of reality and understand it so convincing that even if you're in the game of knowing the reality, that's philosophy, the paradigm of this personal development, our destiny, even if you are in that game, you'll hit a block. Isn't that interesting? Even Parmenides knew about this. Now, Plato didn't elaborate on it. That's why what we're reading here is an addition to Plato, even though Socrates and Parmenides, Socrates was Plato's teacher, Parmenides was Socrates' teacher, even though they showed a familiarity with it, Plato didn't write about it. So we're going back to the Platonic tradition, and Parmenides, and we don't have any works that have remained, or we only have a small bit from Parmenides and nothing from Socrates. So we are returning to the Platonic tradition, bringing back this to improve on it and create a new spiritual paradigm that can rival anything else, because it incorporates everything else, because it's understanding. So, authoritarian, certain, unable to be convinced otherwise, appearing to be saying something extraordinary. Therefore, they're believable, and in believing them, we were accepted as a member of the family clan. This is what we get from it. And also would be there for what we have to sacrifice if we want to free ourselves from that ignorance and those problems and reach a higher level of being. How much do we have to go in this section? Quite a bit. That's okay. We can take our time. We're learning heaps here. We're doing good. When those most significant to us came out with a sense of reality and knowing, okay, most significant to us, they came out, that's a thing, they finally showed themselves. Maybe it's a rare moment when mum or dad finally express what they really care about and worry about. With such a sense of reality and knowing, we believed because this is the significance here. Purple's important. Because to have rejected that as false would have been equivalent to rejecting their most fundamental way of appearing to us as caring knowers. This is what they think is the ideal and caring. So what do we read at the start of this paragraph? It's entirely possible that we live in an intelligible, which means knowing, and caring universe. This is them being their enlightenment, being most real, being most like reality, real, appearing as caring, there's our caring universe, and knowers, there's our intelligible. So let's go back to the start to see that. It's entirely possible to verify for ourselves we are part of a caring and intelligible universe. So, in that sense, we can see these loved ones who are doing this to us are appearing most like the universe, most like reality, caring and intelligible. Only it's not. Only it's their imitation of what's false. It's not true caring and intelligibility. But if they think it is, and we reject their coming out in this caring and knowing way to us, we are rejecting the most fundamental way of appearing to us as caring and knowing. But we knew nothing. We knew nothing. Whoops. We knew nothing other than the world of our youth. We didn't know any better then. With nothing to contrast it with, it would have been unthinkable to reject the guardian's appearance. If it would have been possible to reject that appearance, the child would have stripped the status of authority from the parents. What? Equally, it would threaten the old roles, and the very need for parental role would be diminished. We might have to start relating to each other as souls, selves, co-adventurers.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
The true model of caring and intelligibility, the dialectic, keeping the conversation alive, not shutting down the conversation with this appearance of certainty and authoritarianism. But they don't know that. They think they're being reality, caring and knowing. So we would strip the authority from the parents, great, by the way. Threaten the old roles, fantastic. And the very need for the parental role be diminished, great. The loss of that relationship is easier to endure later in life, but would have been a severe crisis to an immature child. So all of these things that I'm saying, great, would be a crisis for a child. We can say that now because in this series, we're learning to understand for ourselves and become free. In philosophy, we're learning what reality really is and what the self really is. So we are seeing we are capable, and that's our job to master these things. But also when we're saying, good, let's get rid of these old roles, we are now saying that with the understanding that we can replace them with what's true, replace them with the dialectic, replace them with what these are an imitation of. But our parents didn't have that. Reject their bullshit. That would be a loss of a kind of relationship that might be a severe crisis to us as a kid, as a baby. Why? Because they're coming out. They think they're showing what's most important. But to reject it as false, which it is, would be rejecting their fundamental way of appearing to us as knowing and caring. That would be a shock to a kid. They don't know any better. We didn't know any better. It was stripped our authority, which they're clinging to, because like we saw, it's the only audience where they can play out this nonsense. They wouldn't like that. The very need for a parental role will be diminished. Ooh, imagine that. But the loss of that relationship could be easier to endure later in life, keeping in mind they might not transition to philosophy, they might stay stubborn. This is the way of being, my way or the highway, my house, my rules. So we might have to go, oh, okay, I'm out of here. If you're going to be an authoritarian tyrant, a Trump or whatever, Hitler, I'm out of here. Now, ideally, we'd get into midwifery and philosophy, and we'd be learning it every day at school. We'd be practicing it every day over breakfast, and every day at school before morning tea, and at every workplace. So we realize that we are not just dropping this for nothing, we are replacing it with the dialectic, or with their authentic way of being. But without a society like that, you might just be out the door, which would be a crisis for a baby. My house, my rules, that kind of thing. Clearly, to secure the drama's message, players in the Pathologos drama pay careful attention to their audience, and they do their best to show themselves most appropriately. But they know the message may not be believed if the performance is not taken as real. They know this is the what do you call it? Inferiority complex. You know you're bullshitting. You know it's just an act. There's a name for that. What do they call it nowadays in popular culture? They call it good imposter syndrome, they call it. People who realize that it's a big act feel like an imposter. So they have to put on the performance and make sure the performance is taken as real. Surely in these dramas, we are in awe of the emergence of those about us and impressed with the power of that moment. Whoa. From those who we believe know us best, we learn something we believe must be true. Wow, they're passing on a teaching about what must be true. A spiritual success, Dharma teaching. And true in a personal way. Dharma teaching is just a passing on of the Dharma is a word for the spiritual teaching. So the guru creates a special moment where he passes on the blah, blah, blah. Kind of like that, only the distorted version. We're impressed by the power of the moment from those who we believe know us best. We learn something we believe must be true and true in a personal way. When our parents share with us their beliefs, we participate in their beliefs. For in their revealing what they themselves believe about our existence, we share in their reality, as we share in their mode of thought. This is important. In philosophy, we've been learning about the logos is not just, is a way of thinking that has its corresponding states of mind. So we climb the ladder of the logos, but we get to their level of mode of thought. Hopefully we've got the ladder. We always draw the ladder. Can't see the ladder. That's crazy. We always draw the ladder. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here's the ladder. The ladder. Climb the ladder of the logos. So we have the ladder of the logos towards self and reality, which has understanding over here and states of mind. And it casts its shadow. That's the pathologos. So this is, we reach their certain state of being or mode of understanding, mode of thinking, which is actually over here, mode of thinking. So one, understanding is this rail of the ladder. State of mind is this rail of the ladder. The levels of development. That's what we climb in philosophy, but it's also this mode of thinking and the accompanying state of mind that we're imitating over here. So there's our model of the ladder and its shadow. The ladder of the logos and its shadow, the pathologos. So we participate, when they share with us their beliefs, we participate in the beliefs, and they reveal what they themselves believe about our existence. We share in their reality. So there's our reality, a state of mind, and their mode of thought. There's our thinking. The content of the pathologos belief may only be in part verbal, but it was implicit in the intention of those authorities, their manner, the situation itself. The guardian's message is to believe, since the appearance is made believable. When we are young, we are impressed by the appearance of sincerity. We watch those we imitate, we intimately relate with, emerge from the background of their normalcy and play out the pathologos scene. We experience the appearance of sincerity, casting the image of beauty and truth. Or even the appearance of beauty and truth has a power, even its appearance. Indeed, we know well that beauty can be persuasive. That beauty carries a sense of truth about it, as it should be in that way. It should be in that way. It's beautiful. It's the way it should be. Thus, beauty plays a central role in the formation of problems, but in some cases it is not apparent until it is reflected upon. When subjects reflect that those significant to them never seemed so forthright, so decisive, so much themselves as when they were acting out the pathologos. Then they can see that there is a beauty there. Surely there are times when we are surprised to have forgotten. What do we forget? That beauty is not an invariable sign of the presence of truth. Marketing, beautiful people next to your lie, propaganda. But our youth, we have not yet learnt that lesson. Okay? Interesting. We're learning more about the conditions for the scene, the appearance of beauty, why we had to believe it, all the things that we would sacrifice if we didn't, especially a role within a clan, and how rare it is for the parents to have an opportunity to play out this nonsense that was done to them. But for them, it's not nonsense. It's the appearance of knowing. It's a belief and a way of convincing people that is judged as what it means to be knowing. And how rare it is to have an opportunity to pass on your dumb opinions and people to give a shit about it. Normally we don't care, unless it's directly contrasting with, if it's conflicting against our own personal beliefs, then we'll get mad. Otherwise, who cares? Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, so who gives a shit? So, big event for a parent. And also, they think they're benefiting. They think it's caring and being knowing. But we're contrasting with what we learn in philosophy about what's true. Okay? So these are all conditions of the transmission, the conditions of the pathologos. All this has to be there for us to get it. What else needs to be there? We've got some more reading to do about what else needs to be there for this, but we're learning a lot. We're learning a lot about the conditions and why it would be so difficult to reject as a child, and why it can, and as we go, we'll learn more about why it can be difficult to reject even as an adult. So, important to understand its cause and understand what we'll have to go through to become free of our problems and reach Gear 5, Ultra Instinct, the higher state of enlightenment. Freedom and clarity that we want to use along with the other kind of enlightenment, by the way. So, with that, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining me in the live stream. As always, like and subscribe on YouTube, follow on Twitch, join the Discord, support on Patreon, donate if you want. And I hope you're curious about what else is involved in the passing of the translation, passing of the pathologos that we'll need to see to become free, and what difficulties might we face to become free. Lots of fun. I hope you're excited. I hope you're curious. I hope you're wondering. And I hope to see you next time.